All right, get this. Someone wanted to know what Michael Jackson would look like at 66. So naturally, we went straight to the source, AI. And let me tell you, the results are, well, you'll have to stick around to hear about those. But first, how does AI even imagine someone aging?
It's more than just slapping on wrinkles, that's for sure. Imagine, like, feeding a computer every picture of Michael Jackson ever taken. All the angles, the lighting, even the way his features, like, subtly changed over time.
That's really learning.
Yeah, it's like teaching a computer to see faces the way humans do,
Yeah.
picking up on those tiny, tiny details we might not even consciously register.
So it's not just copying and pasting, it's actually learning what makes his face,
Mhm.
and then using those rules to create a realistic projection. Okay, color me impressed
Yeah.
and maybe a little creeped out. But let's get into these results. First things first, hair. Apparently, 66-year-old MJ is still rocking the long, dark locks.
Which, if you think about it, tracks with the data. This is an artist who, like, built an image around that hair, almost like a trademark. It makes sense the AI would hold on to that, even as other features evolve.
It's like even the algorithm knows you don't
Uh,
mess with the king of pop's hair. But here's where things get really interesting. The AI added stubble. It's subtle, but think about it. Michael Jackson, clean-shaven for most of his career, suddenly sporting a little scruff. Why do you think the AI made that choice?
It could be a reflection of aging,
Hmm?
sure, but it also speaks to this idea of the AI making connections beyond just physical features, you know? We associate stubble with maturity, maybe even a touch of ruggedness, something we haven't really seen in Michael Jackson's public persona. It's a subtle shift, but it adds a layer of complexity to the image.
It's almost like the AI is saying, yeah, he's older, but there's a history here, a life lived. But hold on, because it gets even wilder. The AI dressed him in this colorful jacket and top hat combo. Okay, on the surface, very MJ. But someone in the article pointed out it kind of resembles Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, like, what's going on there?
Well, what's fascinating there is how the AI might be drawing parallels between these seemingly disparate figures, right? It's not about literal resemblance, but perhaps a shared rebelliousness, a flamboyance that both Michael Jackson and Johnny Depp embody. It makes you wonder, is the AI tapping into a deeper cultural understanding of these icons, even if it can't, like, articulate it?
Okay, now we're talking AI that can not only age someone, but also seems to get their vibe, for lack of a better term. And this is where things get really interesting because we're not just talking about what Michael Jackson looks like, but what that image represents.
Exactly. And this is where the article you sent really grabbed my attention because it mentions that Michael Jackson's former bodyguard had some really interesting observations about him, later in life.
Now, I don't want to get too gossipy here, but the bodyguard's account, it kind of paints this picture of a man who was really aware of his own image, like constantly refining it, almost obsessed with this idea of control.
And that's fascinating when you like juxtapose it with what we were just talking about. The AI generating this image of him, it raises this whole question of who ultimately owns someone's image, especially after they're gone.
Right, like if Michael Jackson were alive today, would he love this AI-generated portrait? Or would he demand to be taken down? It makes you think about the power of an image, especially for someone like him, whose life was so public yet so private.
And it gets even more complex when you consider the context of, his later years, the controversies, the allegations, because this isn't just about what Michael Jackson looked like, but how we remember him, how we grapple with the totality of his legacy.
The bodyguard even mentions that. Like, he himself started to question things,
Yeah.
to kind of scrutinize Jackson's behavior in light of what he was hearing. Like this AI image, this glimpse into what might have been, forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality of what was.
It's almost like we're hardwired to seek out patterns, to make sense of things, even when the answers are elusive. And this AI, in its own way, is just another tool in that quest for understanding. But it's a tool that comes with its own set of questions and challenges.
It's funny. Earlier, you used the word rebellious
Mm.
to describe the AI's take on Michael Jackson's style. And I can't help but think about how that word applies to his music, his performances, but also in a way to his life.
Mm.
He defied categorization, challenged norms, and that's part of what made him so captivating.
Absolutely. And that complexity, that duality is what makes this whole discussion so fascinating, right? Because we're not just talking about pixels on a screen, we're talking about the nature of fame, of memory, of how we grapple with complicated legacies.
It's like, on the one hand, we have this AI generating images, maybe even simulating behaviors, pushing the boundaries of what's technologically possible.
And on the other hand, we have the very human struggle to reconcile conflicting narratives, to make peace with the past, to find meaning in the echoes of a life as complex as Michael Jackson's.
It's a lot to unpack, and I think this is where we need to take a step back and really consider what this all means for us. We started with this image of Michael Jackson at 66, and now suddenly we're down this rabbit hole of AI ethics and celebrity worship and the reliability of memory itself. It's a lot.
It is a lot, but it's also what makes this whole topic so fascinating, right? Because it forces us to confront these questions we might not otherwise even think to ask ourselves.
Exactly. And it's not just about Michael Jackson. Think about all the historical figures, the loved ones we've lost, who we could potentially resurrect in this digital space.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? On the one hand, imagine the possibilities for education, for understanding the past.
Like, what if we could, like, have a conversation with Albert Einstein about physics? Or ask Harriet Tubman about her experiences on the Underground Railroad.
But on the other hand, where do we draw the line? Who gets to decide how these figures are represented, how their stories are told?
And how do we ensure that these AI recreations, however realistic they may seem, don't overshadow the real, flawed human beings they represent?
That's the key right there. Because as much as we might want to believe that technology can offer us these, definitive answers, the truth is always going to be more complicated than that.
It's like that old saying, don't meet your heroes. But what happens when AI allows us to, like, create an idealized version of anyone, anytime?
It's a recipe for disappointment, for disillusionment, right? Because it denies us the opportunity to really engage with these figures and with history itself in a meaningful way.
So what's the takeaway here? As we, like, delve deeper into this world of AI and simulated reality, how do we stay grounded?
I think it's about remembering that technology is just a tool, right? It's up to us to use it wisely, to approach it with a critical eye, and to never lose sight of our own humanity in the process.
You've given us a lot to think about today. So, to our listener who sent in this question, here's something to chew on. If you could meet an AI recreation of anyone from history, who would it be? And more importantly, what questions would you ask knowing that the answers, however compelling they may seem, are ultimately just a reflection of the data that created them? Thanks for listening.